those of you who are listening in, if you've had these feelings of self-doubt or felt like you're a fraud and someone's going to catch you out, or you felt that you're just constantly an imposter, that you don't belong where you are, especially in the workplace, though as we're going to talk to Kamna, it pops up in other areas of our life as well. You're in very, very good company, I would say, because apparently this does affect perfectionists, this affects hard workers, high achievers. And Kamna, there's some debate also about just telling women they have imposter syndrome. I was telling you, this Harvard Business Review case was saying stop telling women they have it, because there's often systemic bias and issues like that. So what are your thoughts if we frame this conversation from an India point of view? What do you think about imposter syndrome and how do we define it?
I think a lot of times when people come up with some labels, it facilitates conversations in its own way. Um, Unfortunately, what also ends up happening is that somewhere we pathologize something which can also be a normal experience, and which is where I think the Harvard Business Review study also really helps to highlight the fact that you don't necessarily, and you absolutely should not be labeling people with having illnesses or problems without necessarily knowing what is really going on within the larger context of where you're working, where you're coming from, who you are as an individual. And what's characteristic of imposter syndrome, which is the anxiety or the worry or the feeling that you may get caught out, or you're just not necessarily feeling as equipped to be able to handle some of the challenges that a workplace may posit or situations of life may posit towards you. These can be fairly normal experiences also for individuals. And a lot of times we end up pathologizing that and making you feel almost as though there is something very drastically wrong with you to experience it. The reason to highlight this aspect is because a lot of times people then start questioning their own selves, their capabilities, their abilities, wondering about what is wrong with them, what may have gone wrong in their years growing up, how is it or why is it that they may be different from others. And it leads to a whole different set of mental health related aspects, which could compromise an individual's well being. It's very easy to get caught in this entire debate around feeling like I'm having an imposter syndrome, and then as a result, judging your own self, experiencing impact on your moods, constantly having anxiety, being extremely preoccupied, feeling as though you're not being able to do your work well. Mm, and this is something that we end up seeing with a lot of people. People, like you mentioned, could be high achievers as well. And what ends up happening is that people in their minds associate the fact that, okay, if I'm not going in with confidence, maybe it reflects that I don't have the competence. Whereas the two may not necessarily have that kind of an interlinkage. People who
Yeah.
are confident are just able to essentially put themselves across in the right way. But that in no way means that you may necessarily have the skills and the abilities that are required to do a particular job very well. Someone who is underconfident or less confident can equally do a job pretty well as well. But we don't necessarily foster that understanding, reinforce that to individuals, and which is
Yeah.
where the system comes into play, or your larger leaderships come into play, where we need to start bringing in that acceptance to say there are different people who will have a range of experiences, and they would have their own skill sets which they would be bringing in, their own personalities which would be coming in, and we need to start embracing that entire gamut of differences that people bring in with them. We don't
Yeah.
have to necessarily just reinforce that this is one set format in which every employee or person who's in a leadership position should be possessing. We don't need to reinforce that, but somewhere we have over the years done that, and which is where this entire conversation about imposter syndrome has been gaining a lot of traction as well over the recent years.
Yeah, and Kamna, we were talking about this. There was this recent study that KPMG report, and Anirudh, thanks for sending that to us. It was saying about 75% of executives. This was looking mainly. It looked like corporate America, based on the survey that was there. They seemed to feel that they had imposter syndrome at some point. It was really interesting because 85% believe it's a common experience. So there is something to be said for knowing that it's not just you who's going through this. 47% of those said results. They think it results from never expecting to reach the levels of success they have. So I just want to unpack that with you a little bit. So can you give us a few tips in terms of how do you deal with it once you know that it's something that's creeping up and, like you said, perhaps impeding other areas, leaching into other areas as well?
See, I think a few things that people need to start keeping in mind when if you're beginning to feel that kind of anxiousness and you constantly are reassessing or reevaluating or looking over your shoulder and wondering, did I do that right? There are a lot of doubts which are coming in. I think some of the things which you will have to try and find a hold on or a grasp of is one, looking at who you are. Having a great or a better understanding of your own self is something which is very, very critical, so that even when you're finding yourself in situations where you may not be getting reinforcement from the outside, your entire internal understanding of your own self, that self awareness piece, can contribute towards ensuring that you feel more positively about your own individual self. I think the second aspect is somewhere in your own mind, you need to start busting those myths about feeling that you need to be only a certain way or certain types of people are the ones who are going to be associated with certain positions or certain achievements that they can have. Somewhere breaking that mindset is extremely important, and you need to start reinforcing to your own self that I may be different from another, or my expectations may have been different from my own self. But if I'm finding myself in something which is new, which is different, I would have gotten there because I had a certain skill set or something was noticed within me, and I need to be able to trust and believe in that and move forward with that belief system to say that, you know what, I will keep on building on that. That reinforcement from within the self is something which is very critical. And another role which is extremely important is that of the people who are around you. Your support system tends to be extremely critical. If you have family members or friends or colleagues who are constantly pulling the carpet from under your feet, who are always making you rethink what you did, why you did it, raising questions, or raising an eyebrow in concern, saying that maybe you didn't think this right, and not necessarily giving inputs on saying that, you know what, you did do this great, but perhaps this could have also been a helpful approach. If they're not coming in with that problem solving approach but only highlighting where are the problems, maybe you need to just rethink those relationships and how you are engaging in them, because
Yeah.
that is also something which is constantly going to uh, increase those self doubts. And I think the fourth piece also is sometimes we have to also accept that the standards may need to vary. The perfectionism that you were referring to is something that we need to start re-looking at and saying that, you know what, every task, every aspect cannot necessarily be handled perfectly. Your intent counts, the effort that you put in counts. The outcome is not the only thing that you have to look at. The outcome a lot of times may not fall into place, not because of a lack of intent or investment or effort or ability. It sometimes things just don't come together.
Yeah.
And that is an experience that we have to learn to deal with without casting that excessive self blame and experiencing that guilt and then wondering about, should I even be here?
Yeah.
So the analysis has to be not just about the self and what could I have done differently, but also about what was it within the situation, who were the other stakeholders, what was everyone else's role. Could there have been, if certain things within the situation were positioned differently, maybe the same approach would have worked. So you have to take a more holistic perspective on things, which I think goes missing when you're experiencing this imposter syndrome, because your focus is only inwards. Where am I going wrong and what am I doing which needs to be now changed, because I am feeling as though I am unacceptable in these settings.
That's fantastic. Actually, Kamna, as always, any of you watching this, actually very clear guidelines that Kamna has laid out. One is have a better understanding of yourself, so that validation can't keep coming from outside. I think that's really critical, Kamna. Also, when we're talking about transitioning jobs, transitioning roles, because that's when we tend to be harder on ourselves. I'm going to pop in some of these comments as well, which we will get Kamna to address. She's saying also to start busting the myths that you need to be a certain way. And I love this, that leadership or certain roles are meant to be held by a certain kind of person, because that's also conditioning. We need to unlearn stereotypes, come in there. We need to accept that there's a lot of effort. We don't always have control over the outcomes. And then my favorite is the support system, Kamna, because we always talk about the support system as a net positive. But as you just said, they can be our most critical stakeholders. So we need to also have that balance